once it was announced?
Well, obviously the mobile platform we launched about 3 months ago, and we've been really excited watching the growth of it. About 60 million people a month using it, about 320 million experiences. So for something that we feel like we just launched, this is really exciting. I think the question about from a developer standpoint, you know, in a lot of ways, this is take the lessons of Facebook's platform overall. When you think about distribution, think about using Facebook for re-engagement, and taking all those tools and bringing them on mobile.
So 60 million per month using Facebook mobile to discover apps. How many of those are coming through the web app directory versus any other kinds of native integrations that you're doing?
I don't actually know the answer to that question. So I think when you look at the distribution, you know, that's going through our viral channels, right? So that's going through a mix of the grassroots, right? So you have those showing up, for example, like in this place. You have bookmarks when you install an app. And you also, of course, have requests, sort of the most obvious of the original distribution channels of I want you to go do something. I think the exciting part is actually looking at how this integrates with Open Graph and how this integrates with Timeline, where you look at the ability to not interrupt the gameplay. Right? So what you want to be easily engaged with the game, you want to be doing exciting, interesting things. You want that to be generating awareness elsewhere on Facebook. You want that to be making Facebook and Timeline more interesting for you and your friends, rather than always having to be interrupted and say, you know, do you want to do X, Y, Z at this point? Because they can really break the flow of the game experience.
Like historically on the desktop platform, you know, there have been a variety of methods of app discovery over the years. There, you know, at one point was an app directory that in search that had always been a relatively small percentage of discovery. Most of the time it happens through feed stories or through invitations or notifications. Obviously, a lot of those same dynamics. It sounds like you want to, or Facebook wants to preserve or be consistent onto mobile. Are there ways that those are going to fundamentally be different?
Well, I think the important thing is actually many ways for them to be the same, right? So when you think about desktop versus mobile, a lot of ways the last thing you want somebody to have to do is to do a lot of typing to find something, right? What you want is to have the interesting things in front of you so that you can notice that it's there and get excited by it. And so certainly search is always going to be important. Like, wouldn't be surprised if search wasn't important. But when you look at Open Graph stories ending up on feed, ending up on Ticker, ending up on Timeline, those are places where people spend a lot of time and are able to see, hey, that looks interesting, I should totally go try that.
So you're saying that basically you think that in a year from now, the percentage of referrals that apps get either from discovery or new installs or retained users will be roughly the same on desktop and mobile, or there will be certain performance differences between certain channels?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent question. I think it'll come down to what apps end up becoming the successful apps on mobile, right? I think right now when we look at apps, we look at Pinterest, we look at Social Reader, these are apps that are getting like 1 million interactions a day. And so that's pretty successful, but we're just in the beginning. And so I think if you look at Facebook platform overall and you look back over the last several years of the Facebook platform, the applications that were successful out of the gate certainly weren't the ones that are most successful today. And so I think in a similar way, until you really see what kinds of apps are able to be really successful, whether they're games, whether they're apps, that's going to probably really shape what channels are the best for. Because you have channels certainly for discovery, right? But in terms of things like bookmarks, that in many ways is a re-engagement tool. And so different apps, are they an app that you really do interact with multiple times a day, or are you an app that you interact with once a day or once a week? I don't think we know yet which of those are going to be most successful at mobile. I think what's really exciting is going to be to see what everybody in this room ends up doing on mobile and what they end up coming up with.
So, do you also expect the experience to be the same, or at least philosophically the same, between Facebook's native clients and its web clients?
Well, so when you think about mobile on Facebook, so we have the touch-enabled mobile website, we have the iOS client, we have the Android client. About half of the traffic we see comes in, our mobile traffic is on the mobile website. And so it's actually really important for us to keep both of those experiences, or all of those experiences, really good and certainly close to each other in capability. When you look at where HTML5 is going, the kinds of things you can do natively in a mobile browser is getting better practically every day, it seems. And so it's on us to make sure that the m.facebook site, the mobile website, is really good. And if you look back in 2011, a lot of 2011 for us was making the mobile website, the touch site, really, really good and really comparable to our native implementations. And so that then set up our ability to start using those mobile web pages as part of the hybrid app. And I think probably a lot of folks that have read about the discussions of using more web technology in our native apps last year. And that ended up being really important. So it allowed us to roll out pretty significant changes to the Facebook user experience on multiple platforms simultaneously. We were able to do that by leveraging a lot of web technology, and all that came from the work we had done on the website.
So, I mean, there are only a relatively small number of apps in the mobile web directory today. Historically, the directory was something that was used for a small percentage of discovery on desktop, but it was actually phased out over time. Is the directory going to play any kind of different role for Facebook on mobile compared to how it did on desktop?
I think obviously right now we're really busy on implementing these pieces. Right? Where we are today is a platform that just launched. When we look at mobile overall, we have certainly a lot of effort going into both the iOS and Android apps and the mobile website. I think exactly the breakdown and where that appears over the next year is something that I don't think we know yet.
I mean, one of the things that you have mentioned is that, as Facebook has been pretty much the largest app on multiple platforms, it essentially built, hybrid applications that integrate HTML5 into the app, such that large chunks of the app are actually served up over the web. Obviously, there are different, policies in place for what's going on in native applications versus the web. How has that informed how you're designing, the mobile platform and how you want developers to do it?
So, one of the things that came with being able to use web tech more broadly within our native applications was this great flexibility. When you look at the changes to feed, you look at the timeline rollout, we were able to roll out timeline in a way that we're really excited about on the mobile website and inside our native apps. That flexibility has been fantastic, and it's something that allows us to leverage engineering work that goes into the app site and other places. One of the challenges for developers, obviously, is that not every app is something that you can build today using web technologies. HTML5 is this catch-all that means a lot of different things, but to a certain degree, it's high-performance JavaScript, it's pretty good compositing, it's an ability to move a fair number of texts around. And so there's some experiences that work really well in that. I think if you're working on, Infinity Blade 3, the web isn't quite ready for you, especially now in the mobile web. And so I think the most important thing is to think about as a developer, what are your trade-offs and what is most important to you going forward. If you build on the web, you have the ability to do a single app install, get a bookmark, and know that customers anywhere have access to this. And so for many apps, that's going to be really important because what's most important is that, when I'm playing Words with Friends or I'm playing a game that I want to play, like with my mom, that I know she can get to it and I know it's easy for her to play it as well. If you're doing an app that needs really high performance graphics, if you're doing an app that, is doing a ton of blitting, the web play isn't quite ready for you yet. And so, in that case, use native. I think the important part about our platform at this point is we want all of those to be able to generate open graph summaries, to be able to really enrich your timeline and share the story of these apps you're experiencing with your timeline so it's more interesting for you and your friends.
Are there particular examples that you think are doing well right now?
Well, that's, certainly in the mobile reader. That's a particularly good experience right now. I think Pinterest is doing really well right now. And so
what are they doing that's working well specifically?
Well, they're using Open Graph. They are engaging with Open Graph in a way that shares stories that are interesting and are likely to cause your friends to say, hey, that's kind of cool to be able to go read that there. Let me go follow that and do that as well.
obviously there's a lot of developers are really wrestling with technical limitations or at least perceived technical limitations that they have in a lot of different devices that are very, very real, and so a lot of them are still viewing web as experimental, and particularly if they're doing well in the app stores, they're not the ones who are clamoring to push the pace of HTML5 adoption as quickly as possible. But it is in Facebook's interest for HTML5 to become more widely adopted and for developers to be investing more in building apps and building games that are able to be distributed over the mobile web. What things is Facebook doing to encourage that progression and that investment from developers?
Well, I think to back up that question a little bit, I think that what we care about is users being able to share great experiences and great apps with their friends in ways that make sense. Right? For some apps, that's going to be requests. For some apps, that's going to be open graph events. For some, it's going to be the fact that using things like email and other tools. Right? We want to make sure those are available for developers, whatever choice they're making. Right? I want developers to make the right choices for the apps that they're trying to build. In terms of HTML5 improving, I think the good thing is a lot of companies out there are all trying to make HTML5 more effective, browsers get better. Probably a lot of you started playing with Chrome on Android yesterday. If you did, it's a pretty cool browsing experience, right? That's a great step. And so I think that the natural progression of wanting the web to work really well is something that's definitely happening. I think it's incumbent on us to make sure that we write good code, that we're showing good examples, that we're making it easy to integrate. That as new technologies roll out, that we're continuing to keep abreast of it, that we're continuing to test browsers and make sure that we understand the performance characteristics of the environments that we're hoping developers are going to operate within.
Are there particular areas outside of games that you think that are most interesting right now?
So I think the sort of news readers and content sharing seem to be particularly interesting. Certainly, just watching what my friends have been jumping on, that's been an area that has captured a great deal of their attention. I think that when you look at text content, text that tends to actually line up with the web technology really well. And so if you're sharing images and text, sort of building off of that kind of data, HTML5 is really ready for that, and that's pretty cool. I've sort of, this is my background before coming here was doing games. I tend to spend more time with games than other apps, which is probably, my wife doesn't really think that's a good idea, but my daughter really likes the fact that what I tend to do is play games. So I think in a lot of ways what I've been watching is what games are showing up and what games are most interesting.
How has, in the early days of the desktop, the Facebook platform, which was just a desktop at that time, there were a lot of iterations on how the communication channels worked, what the rules were around them, ensuring quality while still providing opportunity for developers to achieve a lot of distribution. And obviously that has continued over the last few years. There have been more tweaks over the last couple of years, but in general, that has stabilized. What areas do you think we might see changes or pulling the levers on distribution or viral channels to enable pure web distribution?
Well, obviously I'm not going to comment on anything that we haven't done yet because I don't know. And I think that if we look at what we've seen roll out on Open Graph, what we've seen is the ability for apps to be sharing in this non-interrupted way and to really enrich timeline and really generate interesting stories coming out of that. Obviously, timeline and Open Graph was a big part of F8 last year, and it's a big area of focus for us.
One of the interesting things that we also saw before was that there were kind of this advent of third-party distribution services that sprung up after the platform launched that enabled smaller developers to arbitrage traffic back and forth, and they were able to monetize those services. But eventually, those didn't really grow. The larger developers and Facebook itself now, have control distribution generally by virtue of the way that communication channels work. We we've seen similar things on mobile. There have been a number of third-party quasi-social services that have sprung up, many of which have become quite large. Apple has launched its own version of that. None of them obviously plugging into the social graph that Facebook has, or are able to do things in the same way that Facebook does. There's a lot of debate specifically around games, how important it is to be able to tap into your social graph where people you supposedly have relationships with outside of the application experience or the game experience. What's your view towards how important the social graph would be on mobile?
I think it's incredible. I think when you look at the full set of social channels, custom mobile graph sharing, request channels, bookmarks. Mobile, somewhat by definition, smaller screen, harder to type on. There are a lot of reasons why you'd much rather find out about something interesting because it's something your friend is interested in. Because your friend has done something incredibly cool, and you want to be able to go do that as well. And so I think that, just in 3 months watching the success of the growth of the mobile platform, I think it's pretty clear that these are very important to mobile going forward.
So, do you think that there will be a place for these third-party services, 2 years down the line?
So, again, it's hard for me to say anything about some other company or service. I think what we should be doing is making sure that as apps and games are sharing, whether it's graph images or whether it's requests, that we're making sure that we're able to take that and get that in front of folks who are going to be interested in it, right? I want to go to your timeline and see things that make me think, wow, I want to go use that too, right? That seems really cool. That tells me something about you. And so I think that's what I'm worried about.
Clearly Facebook has the ability to provide access to a very large set of users and to play a very large role there. When it comes down to the things that have been announced more recently around the Open Graph and timeline, is Facebook thinking about, or is the way that you think about how app distribution will be there, is it similar to how it works on desktop, or how will it be different? At the end of the day, will there be filters for mobile feed stories? Will it be all the same?
Well, I think the important thing is you want to put something in front of a user that is useful to them, right? And so I want to see a story that I can act on, right? I want to see information that I can act on. And so this goes back to the trade-offs for developers in doing native implementations versus HTML5 or web implementations. With over 400 million monthly mobile users, it's a huge audience. That if you can be in front of them with web technology, that when they see it, they can act on it. And so that, I think, is really exciting and a really important part of distribution going forward. Obviously, I don't think we know yet what it means to show you something that you can't act on. It seems like that might be frustrating. So I think that's going to be one of the explorations going forward. But certainly, if I can show you a game that your friends are playing or an app that your friends are using, it's just a click away to be able for you to start using it too. That seems to be a good thing we should continue to do.
What kinds of emerging areas of game design do you think would particularly fit well with where Facebook is going?
That's a good question. I think that when we think about games on mobile, think about what Open Graph allows you to do. What's allowing you to do is share in this non-interruptive way, to share in a way that really ties into the flow of your game as opposed to necessarily having to say, hey, player, go, decide to stop playing for a minute to go issue a request. So in terms of what, different types of games that opens up, I hope that it's going to open up game design as broad as we've seen anywhere else on any other device. People like to be able to share when they've accomplished something, when they've done something that's really cool. And, HTML5 apps in some ways make it very easy to share those things, native apps, as well. And so I think what I expect to see come out of the folks who our audience is, okay, we're able to take this game, we're able to take an idea and put it on mobile. What are the cool moments? Like, what are those moments when someone's playing it where they really want to be able to say to their friend, look what I just did. Like, look what I built, look what I accomplished, look at what level I got past. I think that's going to be really interesting to watch.
One of the aspects of the ticker is that it's generating a lot more real-time activity, either engagement or new user distribution, creating new kinds of synchronous experiences like listening to music. What do you think the key use cases are there on mobile?
So I think that there are, so obviously, being able to think about synchronous gameplay. It was the previous panel was talking a little bit about some of the trade-offs between synchronous and asynchronous gameplay, and certainly sort of this synchronous and turn-based games versus real-time synchronous games. Mobile has different behavior than when you're on a desktop, right? On the one hand, you're always connected, but you're always connected through the 3G network as opposed to your home broadband network. So it's probably a thinner pipe, it's probably higher latency. So on the one hand, taking advantage of the fact that you might be able to do something in real-time synchronous is interesting. I expect to see games exploring that and apps exploring that. I think maybe the broader area to explore is the fact that I'm playing a turn-based game, and I know I can let you know that it's your turn. Because I know we're both playing on our phones, and I know you've got your phone with you, right? And so knowing that I don't have to wait till tomorrow for you to make your move actually makes that game a lot more engaging. And I think the third area is, even though what you're generating is this real-time data, potentially what's going to be aggregated on timeline is something that is more of an aggregation, more of a set of what's happened. And I don't think we're so early in terms of games figuring out ways to leverage that, but I think that's going to be really cool as well.
So we've only got a couple more minutes, but one area we haven't distinguished a lot between is tablets and phones. What principles that we've been talking about do you think really apply differently when it comes to larger tablet devices?
Well, I think one of the cool things about tablets is pound for pound they tend to run the web really well. So being able to do web-based technologies on tablets is something that is pretty cool. They tend to execute JavaScript fairly well. They tend to blend pixels pretty well. So I think the ability to say I'm going to bookmark this app once and have it show up everywhere is going to be really important on tablets. You obviously have screen real estate, so thinking about taking games that were more designed or apps that were designed for a desktop or www experience and pulling them onto tablets, you still have to get over the fact that it's touch, not mouse. And a lot of times when building apps, if you didn't start with touch, you would kind of find yourself in a rat hole of, well, I didn't anticipate not being able to have hover, right? And so I think what we're going to see is more folks who maybe start out with phones where they already solve this, limited pixels, limited screen space, know how to use touch. And being able to take those, we actually have more screen real estate, more CPU horsepower, and do something that's even more expansive view as opposed to, moving on to phones where sometimes you actually have to take sort of much narrower view of the experience.
Well, there have been a lot of reasons why developers have had challenges porting from desktop to mobile or vice versa. One of them is certainly the interaction model that you're talking about. Do you think that will be mitigated at all by having the larger form factor, or the challenge is fundamentally the same?
So I think the danger is that the larger form factor makes you think, well, this is just going to be dumb, and in some ways forces you to not think about it as hard as you would have thought about it if you were going to phone, right? Taking experience onto a different form factor device is more than just the width and height of your keyboard. And so I think in some ways, I hope that developers still think about it really early. What's going to mitigate all of this is the fact that there's so many developers starting to think mobile first, which means that they're thinking about the interaction models at the very beginning of thinking about their apps. And the next step from that is, okay, now you've thought about your interaction model, what's your sharing model for that as well? What are those events? What are those moments that your users are going to be excited to share, talk about, and remember? When they go back and haven't played, in a few days and they come back, oh yeah, I did this really cool thing.
A large portion of Facebook's active users are on mobile, and as you said, 60 million are engaging with apps. Do you know roughly what portion of those are on tablets versus phones? Really qualitatively?
Yeah, but that's not a number that I think we're talking about. So.
Okay. In general, I think we're about to wrap up. But are there any other things related to distribution that you think developers should keep in mind as they're thinking about? A lot of time developers are thinking about a tablet device pretty differently than a phone because of as you said, the opportunities it provides for at least lots of different types of applications. Distribution-wise, won't be the same. Anything different?
Well, what I hope is that the developers are thinking about the product they want to build first, and whatever technology that is, what platform they're building it for, that they're making the right choices in technology for the product they're trying to create, for the user experience they're trying to create. From that, it's thinking about how to leverage Open Graph, getting interesting stories on the timeline. Something that, as a user, you're really excited to see that. I think that's the piece of app development that custom Open Graph and timeline really opens up. And as that comes out on mobile, now you're thinking about a very different device that's with you all the time that you can plug into as well. And so 3 months is a short period of time to start thinking about what those products are, as I suspect we're just at the beginning.
Okay, with that we're actually out of time, but thanks a lot for joining us today, Mark. All right.